first speaker for the day, Hassan Ibn Akram, CEO of Matrickz GmbH.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. So I'll have the privilege to have the first talk of the day, and I'm going to try to make sure that you wake up, because I was having this jet lag problem, and I've talked to some people. I think it's for some of us, it is pretty late. So what I'm going to talk about today is a very important topic, in my opinion. I'm kind of passionate about it. It's autonomous vehicle safety and security. The reason I'm very passionate about it, because for the first time in history, security and safety is coming first. What happens is technology moves forward real fast. We have seen in many industries like the social media and stuff, and then we realize we have to make it safe, we have to make it secured. But for the first time in history, if we do not get our autonomous vehicles safe and secure, it's just not happening. And that's why I find it very, very important to talk about this. Now, a little bit about what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about how safety and security is going to be the enabler of autonomous vehicle. We're going to talk about how the standards, we're coming up with new standards, and what are the main standards we have in terms of safety and security, and how the standards are going to play roles. We're going to talk about how safe is safe enough, and that's a question that the whole industry, even the law enforcement agencies are pondering. How safe is safe enough? And I'm going to have a Q&A session. Please feel free to ask me questions, because I love questions. So it's a little bit about me before I start. I help companies with functional safety, cybersecurity, SOTIV, that kind of things. This is what my company does. That's like our regular stuff. We also do a lot of training. I personally have provided I have trained over 3,000 professionals in automotive industry, in safety, security, and all in these domains. I'm the host of a podcast called Autonomous Vehicle Safety and Security Podcast. And in case, this is some snapshot of my podcast. If you want to follow my podcast, please take a picture of the QR code. So please feel free to follow me. So I'm also working on, last year I wanted to publish this, but I'm working on a book called A Brief History of Autonomous Vehicle. Hopefully at some point of my life I'll be done with this. All right, so again, I already mentioned this, somehow it's doubled, so I'm going to skip this. I want you to watch this video snippet.
They're still under warranty.
Перед нами еще один. Вставляем по двигателю.
Just send them some help!
Now that's dumb.
Быстрее, быстрее!
The motorcade just turned on 7.
Perfect. Make it rain.
So this was a snippet from Fast and Furious 8. Obviously, this is Hollywood. Now, before I move on, I want to ask the audience a question. How many of you would 100% agree that this is technologically possible in real life today? Raise your hands. And the rest of you don't agree that this is not possible, right? Okay, fantastic. So there are like 3-4 hands I've seen. Let's have a look. Now, what we have here, we have like 3 key words that we want to play with today. We have safety, we have security, and we have AI. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back in time. This is Moscow, 1983, September 26th. This was a very significant day for us to learn what AI can do and what kind of a danger we have with AI. So this very day, what happened is the Soviets created a nuclear launch detection system, an AI-based nuclear launch detection system. And their system, at this very day, detects a positive. Now, this gentleman who was working near Moscow, Lieutenant Petrov, he felt there's something fishy about it. Something was not right with this alarm, nuclear alarm. Now, he looked into the matter one more time, and it turned out to be a false positive. Now, imagine Lieutenant Petrov did not find a false positive. It would have been, the immediate response would have been a counter-strike, right? So a human in the loop saved the world from nuclear warfare. And that's why the 3 key words that I was talking about, safety, security, and AI, we have to put another component here, which is human. And when we talk about autonomous vehicle, that's what we want to eliminate. We want to eliminate human. Now, when it comes to safety and security, I'm going to kind of take a historical approach. How did we deal with safety so far when we have a human-driven car? And where is the problem if we take the human out of the equation? So we all started, the actual automotive safety started taking lessons from the aviation industry. And with aviation industry, this is amazing. It's very interesting for me because they had this autopilot system for a long, long time. So I asked my friends in the aviation industry, so how did you do it? So here's this story that really struck me. I met a pilot once, a Lufthansa pilot, when I was traveling from Munich to LA, and I asked this gentleman, "Look, I mean, you have this autopilot for a long time. What do you think about it?" And he also was curious about what I do. I told him I work with autonomous vehicle safety and security, and he started telling me stories. Look, as a human, we have this thing called feeling. We feel something. The plane is a large object. So he told me a story. There's this sensor that detects the angle of attack of a plane. And sometimes for snow or many other reason, that sensor simply doesn't work. But even though the plane is so big, it can feel the angle. How is the positioning? From the cockpit, the pilot can feel it. So if the number is funny, he can do something about it. So there are so many things that we can learn from the aviation industry. So, and we did learn a lot from the aviation industry. And our first standard that we came up with was ISO 26262. ISO 26262 safety was predicated on 2 things. First of all, faults or malfunctioning. There has to be some malfunctioning in the vehicle, and that would result to some safety hazard, and we deal with that. That's number 1. Number 2 was there was a human who was in charge. So what we did is we categorized safety criticality. We call it ASIL, Automotive Safety Integrity Levels. We categorized it based on 3 things. How likely is it to occur? How much severe can it be? And number 3, which is the key element when it goes to autonomous vehicle, is controllability. Because we gave a lot of responsibility to the driver with a human-machine interface, and we talked about controllability. We gave them the controllability. So if the driver can control it, if it is somehow in his control, we can get away with it. Now, with autonomous vehicle coming, we have seen beyond malfunctioning. We have seen the Tesla incidents where everything was perfect because of weather condition. There was no malfunction in the vehicle. Because of weather condition, it was simply not detected what it was supposed to detect. So the analogy is kind of like this. Imagine that you have a knife. And with the knife, you are supposed to chop vegetables. Now, when you chop vegetables with the knife, accidentally you chop your finger. Now, the intention of the knife was not to chop your finger, and there was no malfunction in the knife. The knife was working perfectly, but the intention was different. And it let us think beyond malfunction, which is absolutely necessary in autonomous vehicle. We came up with a new standard or an extension of the current standard, which we call safety of intended functionality, or SOTIF. So in AI, we have two things. There are two things we know. We know the training data. We know the test data and the test result. Beyond the training data and test data, we know nothing. And we come up with certain kind of probability. Our machine learning colleagues said 99% accuracy or 99.5% accuracy. It's an amazing result from a machine learning perspective. But as a safety expert, we can't live with that. We have to know what can go wrong. And in AV, we simply do not know what can go wrong. And that's why we have this problem of unknown. So when you know something, you can take measure to take care of the problem. Now, unknown is you don't even know that what you don't know. So this is the main problem of autonomous vehicle safety, and SOTIF tries to deal with it with testing. So traditionally, testing is all about requirement. In ISO 26262, you have the functional requirements written, and you have to make sure that you test them rigorously. Now, SOTIF goes beyond requirement-based testing, comes with scenario-based testing, because you can't specify everything in your requirements. So unknown is still the problem. Like I said, controllability. Traditionally, we depended on controllability that a human will take care of it. Now, there is no human. I mean, it's also a question of liability. If there is no person in there, if an incident happens, there is a person who's responsible for that, and you sue that person. Insurance companies sue that person. Now, who do you sue? Because there is no people in there. So we came up with ISO 21424, which is essentially SOTIF. That's on top of ISO 26262. Now, it deals with the unknown problem. Now comes the cyber attack, the scenario we just started with. And a lot of people thought today, when I asked the question, that how many of you think that this is possible today? Well, actually, it was already possible in 2015. And we don't have to see that again, no. So this is the event in 2015. Charlie Miller and et al. In a lab setting, fortunately, they showed that they can take control of a vehicle remotely. Now, when we do car hacking in our lab, if it is a relatively old vehicle, it's easy to hack into it, but there is not much you can do with it. You hack, you have fun, but if it is a relatively modern vehicle, like a Tesla or in this case Jeep, it's hard to break into it. But once you break into it, you can weaponize it. You can do whatever you want it to do. It's pretty much like Hollywood fantasy that we have seen, 1,000 zombie cars, and you can make cars rain. That's exactly what they showed in Fast and Furious 2008, and this is true today. We don't have to wait another 10 years or anything. This was true in 2015. So this is where like our car hacking that we do. So we came up with another standard to deal with the cybersecurity issues, which is ISO SAE 21448. It's a joint approach of ISO SAE 21448. So these are the standards, these are the three standards, in my opinion, are the most important standards today. There are plenty of other ISO numbers which are also relevant and important, but this is really the foundation of safety and security. And if this is what we do on a daily basis. So if you ever happen to need any help on these things, I'll be your go-to person. Now the last question: how safe is safe enough? Again, we heard numbers like 8 trillion miles, 100 billion miles, and many the value of how safe is safe enough and how do we know how safe is safe enough. The range varies at a large scale. So the question is, how do we know the autonomous vehicle is safe? It's all about data. For traditional safety, we have data for decades, and we know how, in which conditions it's more likely for accident or hazard to happen, and we take measure. But in this case, we simply don't have enough data. Now, in order to answer this question, I came up with two questions. The two questions are: when is human better than AI? That's number one. And when is AI better than human? So we have seen cases where AI is working much better than human. Your lane keeping assistant, for example. It does simply, Elon Musk told a story that there was an accident with Tesla, they killed a biker. If there was simply a lane keeper, the driver was sleeping, if there's simply a lane keeper, we could have saved that person from dying. So obviously there are cases where AI is better than human. Now we have seen the 1983 scenario where we needed a human in the loop. So these two questions are the primary questions. And from aviation industry, we know that these two questions are also root of many problems. How? So a lot of fatality in aviation industry happens simply because of the confusion if the pilot is in charge or the autopilot is in charge. So these two questions and how do we deal with are really essential. Now, here is another very, I think so far the best answer I've found is this one. It's from Philip Koopman's book. And he tries to answer how safe is safe enough. I mean, he writes it so beautifully, so I didn't even paraphrase, I've just taken it. The most pressing question regarding autonomous vehicle is, will they be safe enough? The usual metric of at least as safe as a human driver is more complex than it might seem. Which human driver? Under what condition? And are fewer total fatalities okay, even if it means more pedestrians die? Who gets to decide what safe enough really means when billions of dollars are on the line? And how will anyone really know the outcome will be as safe as it needs to be when the technology initially deploys without a safety driver? So, like I said, I mean, these are more questions than answers, but this kind of tells us how complex the scenario is going to be, how safe is safe enough. For me, it's if we can reduce this number. Let me ask you this question: if we can reduce this number, would you agree that this is safe enough? If yes, raise your hand, please. And the rest, you think that if you reduce this number, it's still not safe enough. It's an amazing thought, because you're right. I mean, who was dying and how are we handling it? It's much more complex than that. But at least if we can reduce this number, at least we know that we're killing less number of people because of autonomous vehicle, but it's going to be more complex than that. All right. So again, how do we decide that we know this is safe enough? That's another question. And like I said, some people talked about 8 trillion miles, some people talked about 10 trillion miles. So Toyota is talking about 8.8 billion miles, and they're building testing parks where they will be driving all these things, all the AVs heavily. And this is also not a question of only money, it's a question of time, you know. Second thing is, when I live in Munich, the north of Munich, very close to the BMW autonomous vehicle campus, and I see these BMW autonomous cars moving around all the time. Now, it's one thing to test in the nice suburb of North Munich, and another thing is to test really those edge cases that are really be decisive. So, with all these questions, I'm going to end with, again, another quote from one of my favorite authors, Yuval Noah Harari. In safety and security, especially in security, there's always this security proponents say, hey, we shouldn't do this because it's not secure enough. And believe it or not, it's going to happen. No matter if I like it or not, AV is going to happen. We can't stop AV. So what he says is people are usually afraid of change because they fear the unknown. Thank God that he didn't say unknown. But the single greatest constant of history is that everything changes. The only thing that will remain is changes. And we don't even know how the future is going to be. So it's going to happen whether we want or not. We have to make it safe and secured. Otherwise, when we didn't make the technologies like social media and many other things safe, things like Cambridge Analytica happened, many other things happened, but we didn't lose lives. But this time, we may lose lives. So this is the book that I was actually quoting it from. This is me, my contact details. If you want to take a picture of this. And if you want to connect to me in LinkedIn, here's the QR code. I would be more than happy to entertain some questions.
Delightful to see you here. I was actually following your podcast, so
thank you.
Really nice to see you in person. I'm curious, given what we've seen so far in cybersecurity standards for vehicles, and what we see emerging now on regulations, and especially how the U.S. is laying out a number of theories of harm, right, on connected vehicles in a very broadly defined way. Everything from the hardware, every component that can be an entry point for malicious cyber behavior, to, of course, the software and data flows and everything else. What's the opportunity now for setting standards, just in response to these theories of harm and the idea of potentially state-backed cyber activity and things like that, the things that national security professionals are looking at?
Great question. Thank you so much for questions. So it's so many stimulating points you brought up. First of all, again, I have a very, very radical standpoint here. Standards are actually there to protect the OEMs so that they can say, wait, I checked all the boxes. And the standards that we have, it's 21434 in terms of cybersecurity, it's a great start. But if you comply with the standard, can you say your product is secured and safe? I don't agree with that. There are much more, you have to go beyond standards if you really want to make your product safe. Now, can I go and tell my clients that you have to do all this and spend so much money? I'm going to lose all my clients if I do that. So the idea is finding a sweet spot where we can take reasonable risks. Because there is no such thing as absolute safety or security. If you want to be absolute security, you have to stay in a metal cage with zero connectivity. We're not doing that. So we have to take some risk. And ISO 26262 has a fantastic line. We should not take unreasonable risk. It's double negation, but it's the meaning is beautiful. So we have to take reasonable risk. If the risk is reasonable, if we can live with it, we have to take that risk. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And if there are any gaps in current standards that you think will be the focus now, I'm curious.
100%. The ISO 21434, the first draft, people are working with the first draft, and at the same time, the committee is working on a newer edition. So there are gaps, and we'll have to. For example, the obvious gap is there is no chapter like ISO 26262 separated for system safety, software safety, hardware safety, and in this case, security, system security, hardware security, software security. So we need to go deep on those. Then also security when you're designing chips, silicon security. ISO 26262 is pretty matured on those aspects, but slowly, I'm pretty sure ISO 21434 is going to take off. Any other questions? Yes.
Kind of a thought question here, but in the spectrum of threats, really for the industry, or I guess that would arise from autonomous vehicles, do you think there are more posed by nefarious cyber actors, or brittle AI systems that take forever to be trained?
Wow, this is an amazing question. Now, when we're talking about AI today, we're talking about almost a path toward, a general AI. So that is going to change everything. Now, when 2022, when ChatGPT came out, the whole 2023, we just talked about, where the whole world's going to change. And it has changed, but we didn't see as much as the impact as it was anticipated right away. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, here are some obvious and what already happening today, not only in vehicle, but I'm gonna tell you that people are using AI. For example, you can clone your voice, right? So people do social engineering by cloning voices. There was one case in Singapore where somebody got a call, at first an email from their boss, from a legitimate company email address of the CEO, that you should transfer this amount of money. And then that person responded, can you tell me in person, can we talk about this in person? Immediately she got a call and say, look, I can't call, but let's get into a video call. Sure, there was a video call, and that person's boss was there who was telling her to transfer, and 5-6 other real members of that company, they were all in the video call. It turned out those are all AI avatars. So these are the things happening. Social engineerings are happening, and we know it from the data that traditionally 80% of the attacks, there is a social engineering involved behind those attacks. Now, social engineering has just made, zillion times easier or crazy. Another problem that we're going to see pretty fast is now you can create an AI. OpenAI and OpenAI or GPT or Bard, they have this capability, but there's kind of like you have to jailbreak it. That they can work as a hacker. So you have a super intelligent machine that can create the attacks for you. Now, I'm pretty sure if it doesn't exist today, there will be an LLM, large language model, only for hacking. They'll create it. If we can do it for doing good, you can also create it for doing evil. Like fire and many, nukes, all those technologies you can use to do good things, you can do bad things. So these things are going to pose enormous security issues that we can't even imagine today.
Any other questions?
Yes.
I was on the committee that wrote the first edition in 26.2.
Wow.
And I can confirm that there was awareness that this standard did not address driver out of the loop. So that wasn't that kind of something that was...
That made sense, because if there's a driver who's responsible, then why would you think about driverless? That made total sense when it was drafted.
So that was very intentional. My question is this, is that in the world that I work in, there's a big debate, which is, should an autonomous vehicle be imitating driver behavior? Or do you achieve safety by an autonomous system that is following the rules for safe driving? And those are two very different things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so which one would you, do you think is the right path forward?
I don't know. This is a very difficult question. So the question is itself interesting. The question is, when the AI, when the autonomous software is mimicking human behavior, then we're not following rules. We're not stopping at stop signs. Peter reminds me every time I drive in California how much the fine is if I don't stop in the stop sign. But this is what humans do. You know, we don't follow the rules like the way it's written. Now, there was already a case where I think it was Tesla who were fined because the Tesla car was not stopping fully at the stop sign. Now, which one is better? This is a very, very interesting question to probably simulate and see. It could be a research topic to see what would be better.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.